Hello, welcome everybody. I have pleasure to meet you in this international Deloitte conference. I'm very glad that we have participants from all over the world. So to some of you, I may say good morning, to the others I may say good afternoon, or even good evening. So welcome. As a way of introduction, I'm Mindaugas Jukna, Audit and Assurance Director in Deloitte, Lithuania. During my 18 years practice, I have been auditing and consulting various financial sector clients, both local ones as well as international ones, also including our regulator, Bank of Lithuania. Now we are in Deloitte helping companies to obtain licenses as well as providing support in the post-licensing period. This is our second conference. We had our first conference back in September last year, when we were talking about various challenges the companies are facing in the post-licensing period. So we symbolically called it in search of the golden middle, when really companies have to balance both growth ambitions and expansion plans with the regulatory challenges. And we had speakers both from business companies as well as from the regulators. We're talking about Bank of Lithuania inspections, as well as the challenges on managing GDPR and PSD2 issues. For this conference, we decided to step a couple of steps back and really talk about the pre-licensing issues. So on one hand, we will have speakers from various business entities who will talk about their journey into getting the license and how did it help to grow and expand their business. And on the other hand, since we have this international audience of listeners, we thought we would also introduce Lithuania and what this small, proud country has to offer to you. So I really do hope you will find this conference interesting, and the topics will be interesting and relevant to you. But as I like to say, each event, each matter is as useful to you as you want it useful for you to be. Therefore, I really do encourage you to ask questions on our YouTube channel where this conference is being translated. All you have to do is sign in, and in the chat box you can ask various questions to our speakers throughout the presentation that they are delivering. After their presentation, we will sum up those questions and then we will address back to the presenter. So thank you. I will not keep you longer, and let me introduce our first speaker, Justas from Invest Lithuania. Welcome, Justai. Word over to you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Justas. I'm a FinTech investment advisor at Invest Lithuania. I'm very happy to be here today with you and to chat about a couple of things. So number one, for those of you who don't know much, to tell you more about Invest Lithuania, who we are, what we do, and how can companies benefit from partnering with us. And second subject, of course, is Lithuania's FinTech hub and how do we rank compared to other countries. How did Lithuania become such a major FinTech hub, and why it is worth keeping an eye on us? So to start with, Invest Lithuania is a governmental entity that was put together to promote Lithuania's business environment and to help global companies exploring new business opportunities here in Lithuania. And of course, FinTech is something that we put high on our priority list. That is why we have a dedicated team of people like myself who only work with FinTech and related companies. And not only we help them to expand their footprint in Lithuania, but also we try to identify new opportunities for Lithuania as a jurisdiction, and also new ways of improvement and push for meaningful change. So moving to another topic. which is Lithuania's FinTech hub, I believe that in order to claim that a certain jurisdiction is a major FinTech hub, there should be a lot of FinTech activity, a lot of innovation happening in that specific area. So if we look at the recent history of Lithuania's FinTech, we can see that at the moment, Lithuania houses over 200 FinTech companies, regardless of their business model. But if we take into consideration only licensed ones, those can passport their services across European Economic Area, I can say that no other country in the EU hosts more of these companies than Lithuania. So naturally, with 118 licensed companies, Lithuania makes the largest FinTech hub in the European Union. Furthermore, Vilnius, our capital, was recently ranked as the best city globally for attracting tech startups, where greenfield FDI projects made in areas of IT and software development were measured per capita. And finally, our competitive business environment is also very interesting subject to touch, as Lithuania, with short setup times, adequate level of bureaucracy, ranks 11th globally and 3rd in EU in terms of doing business. So our financial infrastructure, tech readiness, and competitive business environment makes our FinTech ecosystem very active, vibrant, and empowers not only growth, but also gives us an ability to build bridges between countries. So that's why Lithuania, for a second year in a row, was ranked as the 4th best location globally for developing FinTechs, after US, UK, and Singapore. But that was not always the case. In fact, if we go back 5 or 6 years in time, in 2015 or 16, our market was dominated by relatively low number of ecosystem players, mainly commercial banks. So even though those banks had good reputation, good trust, and credit rates, they were not so quick to catch up with innovation. And that's simply because innovation is a huge expense that in such highly concentrated market as Lithuania was at that time, nobody wanted or dared to take. So about that time, it was decided that in order to accelerate innovation, increase competition, quality of service, and at the same time reduce cost for end customers, we have to create competitional pressure for current market players by bringing new ones to the game. And the best way to do that is by making our FinTech ecosystem more welcoming to FinTechs and investors from around the globe, to be able to simultaneously increase the number of ecosystem players as well as increase FinTech adoption rate. So that's why Lithuania adopted its FinTech strategy with the aim to juggle between customer centricity by giving companies freedom to innovate, and by understanding FinTech-related risks and addressing those risks to the market by giving companies the confidence to launch. So after the adoption of this FinTech strategy, things started to accelerate. But FinTech strategy was not the only thing that contributed to this steep growth. Thanks to EU common licensing rules and harmonized market, companies that get licensed in Lithuania, they not only get access to our internal market, but also they get access to whole European Economic Area, which is 500 million potential customers in 32 countries. So that's really a lot. So if EU-issued license all have the same weight, then there are other things to consider when choosing potential location for your FinTech, such as how fast you can enter the market, how the regulator treats you, or even how the regulator communicates with you. So the Bank of Lithuania, our integral regulator, is recognized globally for its level of innovation and cooperation. And a great proof of that could be a recent Global Impact Award from the central banking community. So guided by a principle of being a partner rather than a watchdog, the Bank of Lithuania managed to streamline license application procedures. And right now, on average, it takes around 6 to 9 months for companies to get licensed and get access to that market. But let me be clear here. This was achieved without making any discounts to market participants, without letting them cut any corners, or even without taking any additional risks that we can't control. But simply it was achieved by pushing for digitalization and distributing resources. A good example of that could be that the Bank of Lithuania switched its working language to English and launched newcomers program where companies can consult dedicated team of specialists throughout the whole phases of their application and get advice on their business plan, quality of the application. So as you can imagine, it helps to save time for both companies and the regulator. But having many companies on the map is not a win in itself if those companies are not doing something new and innovative. So that is why the Bank of Lithuania launched multiple sandboxes where companies can test and pilot their new ideas and concepts on supervised environment. But that's only one way to see things, as those sandboxes are equally important to the regulator, as they gives an ability for the regulator to be close to innovation, to be able to understand them and identify all potential risks, but to be not too close to interfere with over-regulating. So that's why we have sandboxes such as LB chain for things that are yet to be regulated, and sandboxes such as regulatory sandbox for things that aim to minimize regulatory compliance burdens so that the companies can spend more time on innovating. But probably the biggest value proposition point when it comes to our payment infrastructure is Centralink, unique payment system run by the regulator. So historically, it was launched as a central bank clearing system where commercial banks could clear their euro payments. So fintechs that wanted to explore opportunities in fields of payments and remittance, they had to rely on commercial banks' rails of infrastructure and their rules of the game. So the Bank of Lithuania decided that instead of keeping it open for just selected few, we can open this payment infrastructure for all licensed companies. So payment institutions, electronic money institutions, credit unions, they can all create their own financial infrastructure without having a middleman in between. So that includes the ability of issue unique IBAN codes to end customers, get direct access to full range of SEPA schemes, and to be able to reach more than 50,000 banks and branches globally. So for companies, it means increase of operational speed and reduce of operational costs. And for end customers, it means more abilities to choose and better access to the finance. So that's already a win in itself. And just to give you an understanding how much of the impact the Centralink have on our financial ecosystem. So in 2020 alone, fintechs cleared over 120 billion euros throughout the Centralink. So I believe this number speaks for itself. But we can all agree that not every fintech needs a license, as well as not every fintech needs financial infrastructure, but every fintech needs people to drive their growth. And talent here plays a key role. I'm quite confident to say that one of the biggest strengths in Lithuania is our talent. A good example of that could be our ability to communicate. Being a small country and having a micro language puts us under constant pressure to adapt. So Lithuanians start learning languages at a very early age. And as a result, over half of our population speak at least 2 foreign languages, not only English, but also other. So as you can imagine, it sets a perfect basis for international companies to hire talent here. Furthermore, Lithuania has one of the most educated workforces in Europe, with 56% of our adult population having higher university degree, makes us third in EU in this regard. But our local universities are doing a great job, especially in fields of IT. At the moment, we have over 10,000 IT specialists in the pipeline, soon to enter the market as developers. Historically, Lithuanians were very keen on applied sciences such as math and engineering. So when the digital economy started booming, it was a rather natural shift for those people to IT. And as a result, Lithuania right now has around 40,000 ICT specialists in the labor market. So in terms of talent, we have highly skilled and educated talent. And in terms of talent availability, we're trying to keep up with this growing demand by deploying external sources. So that's why we have various programs dedicated to bringing talent from abroad, including our own diaspora or entrepreneurs for non-EU entrepreneurs who want to come to Lithuania together with their businesses. And in the longer term, try to keep up with this demand by establishing close cooperation between all levels of infrastructure, trying to determine how the future will look like and what future roles fintechs will hire in the future. In that way, we help local universities to establish their own fintech-related programs where students can learn new and innovative subjects such as artificial intelligence, financial engineering, compliance, or even fintech entrepreneurship. So hopefully this will not only allow us to stay in the game, but to remain major fintech hub, not only in Europe, but also in a global context. So to summarize everything that was said before, this is a list of just very few companies that are operating in Lithuanian market. I believe that they all can confirm what was said before, and they can all prove me being right. So if you have any questions or you want to explore business opportunities in Lithuania, or even if you're not sure if that's the right path for you to take, just drop us a line and we'll do our best to make that happen. Thank you.
Juste, thank you for presentation. I see one question coming from the participants. I am referring to Mark, but may I address that question to Dovile, because it relates to licensing of e-money app in buying and selling cryptos. I would say it's more a question to Bank of Lithuania. So I will bit pack this question. Maybe let me ask a couple of questions from my side. So
Sure.
apart from what you've mentioned, can you name any financial benefits for establishing businesses in Lithuania? How does that work?
Yeah, of course, sure. So Lithuania is still a relatively new country to EU. I can say that we're still less expensive country than most of the Western European countries that fintechs naturally keep an eye on them. So when it comes to work remuneration or other employment costs, cost of employment in Lithuania could be up to a couple of times lower compared to other countries such as United Kingdom or Berlin. Also keeping in mind that other cost involvement into setting business, such as rental cost or launching businesses as well, can be significantly lower than comparing to those countries. Furthermore, we offer a couple of incentives for R&D activities as well as for HR grants for hiring talent that can give cashback benefits for companies that employ at least 20 people and create new additional workplaces. So I believe that this sets a great ground for international companies to set up in Lithuania.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Again, maybe coming back to your presentation, you've covered many Lithuania's advantages for starting a fintech here. What are top 3 ones? What do investors appreciate most? What feedback do you get back?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So if a company needs a license, then naturally it's our fintech license, access to financial infrastructure, and of course, talent. If companies do not want to get a license, then naturally they come here to look for a talent. So of course, talent pool is number one, the quality of our employees and for them education and ability to build those revolutionary products that some of the companies that I showed already did that. And as well as cost involved into employment and costs involved into running business here in Lithuania. As I mentioned, these costs could be significantly lower compared to other countries. And of course, our financial incentives that I just mentioned.
Okay, thank you, Juste. I see another question coming from Mark about average salaries for fintech employees, about KYC, ML, and general manager, and maybe other key staff. Can you use the comment on this? About maybe salary range with all the taxes on top. What's the total cost? Yeah.
Yeah, so we always try to compare Lithuania salaries to other major fintech hubs. So when we compare London, I think that's for average KYC employee, the salary is up to 2 times lower than in London. In Berlin is around 1.5 times, not to mention San Francisco. So I would rather not, go to direct amount of salaries and all cost of employment, but it's very important to know that our tax structure is like that customers pay most of the taxes here in Lithuania. So given all the costs involved, it's very important to know that Vilnius, as a major fintech hub, it's still one of the least expensive fintech hubs in Europe.
Okay, thank you, Justin. Thanks for the presentation. Our next speaker is Dovilė from Bank of Lithuania, who will talk about various initiatives that Bank of Lithuania is taking to build and foster the FinTech ecosystem, as well as maybe we'll talk more about and we'll elaborate more about the initiatives that Justas mentioned already. So, Dovilė, welcome. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to be a part of this FinTech conference. And actually, I would like to thank you, first of all, for your interest in our jurisdiction, into Lithuania. As it was introduced, my name is Dovilė. At the Bank of Lithuania, I'm working with two main initiatives and projects. This is Newcomer Program and Regulatory Sandbox. So I will explain on that what we are doing and what we are offering in a more detailed way during my presentation. And today also I will introduce you Bank of Lithuania and what initiatives are dedicated for our FinTech sector here. So let's start with a short introduction to the Bank of Lithuania, which is a central bank in our country. You can see in the slide that actually we are covering a lot of different functions, but today my presentation would be based just on part of it, which is related to the being regulator and supervisory authority for the financial sector. We are the supervisory authority responsible not only for prudential, but for business conduct supervision as well. That means that we have the general overview of actually all financial markets in Lithuania. We are providing licenses, issuing licenses, and supervising electronic money and payment institutions, as well as crowdfunding platform operators, banks and specialized banks, credit unions, financial advisory firm, insurance companies, and a lot of others. What we had in the end of last year, this is the numbers of FinTech companies, licensed companies in Lithuania. You can see that the numbers are really quite high. If we look to past few years, we can see that actually we have the increase of new 30 FinTech companies, licensed companies every year. So we see the growth is continuing to be, and we expect that this year also will be the similar, or it looks that the tendency and the interest into this market also remains quite high. Why all these companies choose the Lithuania? I think that Justas already mentioned, we have a lot of reasons. We have a lot of talents in Lithuania. Another part is us as a regulator. We are really focusing on how to create a FinTech friendly regulatory environment, how to let FinTechs to introduce new and innovative services into market, and how to make our processes as well effective and fast without cutting any corners or avoiding any risks or compliance requirements. So we have a toolkit which is already in place. I will talk about few of these tools in a more detailed way, so it would be better for you to understand what you can get if you apply for one or another. I will start with Newcomer Program. Actually, this is the start and the beginning for almost all FinTech companies in Lithuania. If they are planning to apply for a license, we really encourage to use this program. It was created 4 years ago, and it is specifically dedicated for the applicants looking for possibilities in Lithuania and wanted to be part of our FinTech ecosystem. This is a one-stop shop solution for fintech companies. There we are providing the guidance and the consultations, starting from very basic information about the licensing, about the process or the regulation. But also during this program, we can discuss more innovative business models to discuss how do we see this business model and compliance to the legal framework and how we can make it happen. Also in the newcomer program, we offer a possibility to have initial call or meeting. Nowadays, it's conference calls. Their companies can present their business model and we can discuss on that. How do we see the feasibility of this business model? Whether we see any obvious no-go elements in the business model. This let us and the applicants save the time, not waste the time, and be more prepared for the licensing procedure. Of course, as a Bank of Lithuania, we are focusing on the quality, not on quantity. So in the newcomer program and after that in the licensing process, we want to see financially sound, reliable and transparent financial market participants with feasible business model. We want to see that the applicants truly understand the importance of compliance and they are prepared to be compliant, to apply the highest standards of compliance and the safety. During the licensing, we also do risk-based approach. This means that not all the companies who once get a license in Lithuania, and this is really important process for us to assess and to be sure who is getting a license in Lithuania. Some examples from our practice that basically 1 from 5 newcomers goes further and applies for a license, and approximately 30% of the applications they are not granted with a license. So this is actually quite high numbers, but as I mentioned, the newcomer program I think is advantages because of that. That we can discuss in a very transparent way, how do we see the business model in our regulatory environment. Also, in the newcomer program, we are providing the guidance and recommendations. Last year, we published our practical advices how to get ready for the licensing. It is based on our practice and common mistakes, what we see in the process. So I think also it's very useful for you if you are thinking about being licensed here to go through this recommendation and to be prepared better for the process. As well, we have published the customer's journey. Actually, it's the infographic showing very transparently all the process of authorization of electronic money and payment institutions. This led for companies and applicants to understand what is the process, what are the steps, and what could be the outcomes of each of these steps. And we have electronic licensing tool also. This tool was very useful during the pandemic period. Actually, all the applicants can submit all the documents only in electronic way. This is a user-friendly application form where you can choose the license type you are applying for, and you will find the list of documents you need to submit for us. Also, Justas mentioned in his presentation that we are accepting documents in English, so it is also one of the advantages for fintech companies. That's shortly about newcomer program, which during last 4 years was used from more than 500 applicants. which came from more than 60 countries. So we have a variety of interests from all over the world. And now I would turn to another our tool, which is Regulatory Sandbox. It is dedicated more for already licensed companies or potentially being licensed and supervised by the Bank of Lithuania. Why we created the Regulatory Sandbox framework? There are two main aims. Actually, we have an intention to ease the implementation of financial innovation in the market. Of course, first of all, in Lithuanian market. Another very important aspect and intention is that we really want to understand the innovation, how it works, what is the effect of the innovation, what are the shortcomings or potential risks involved in such innovations, and how it needs to be addressed in the regulation. In order to be the part of our regulatory sandbox and actually to test the innovation, the applicant needs to comply with 5 eligibility criteria. The innovation should be genuine. That means it should be something new to Lithuanian financial market. Also, it should bring the benefit to consumer or society in general. Obviously, that there should be a need for testing in a live environment. That means that for implementing the innovation, you face maybe some uncertainty, or it's not clear how you need to fit in the regulatory framework, or how you need to apply specific law. Readiness for testing, another important aspect, that the applicant needs to be prepared for testing the innovation, and of course, ambition to provide this innovation and financial services in Lithuania. During the regulatory sandbox, we offer 3 tools. 2 of them are the most popular. It is active consultation and active application of a principle of proportionality. These tools are directly corresponding to what I mentioned when I talked about the need for testing. And actually, this means that in the regulatory sandbox, we are testing the financial innovation. When we face the situation there, it's not clear how this innovation needs to be implemented. And here, we are taking our role as a regulator. We are providing really active consultations, and we can apply the proportionality to see how this innovation works. In our regulatory sandbox, we already tested a peer-to-peer insurance platform. This platform is based on the principle of sharing economy. What is attractive for the consumers and clients of such a platform is that they can get back funds which are unused during the insurance period. So now we are working on the conclusions of this testing, and this would be available in the nearest future on our website as well. Another topic I would like to cover and to share with you is LB chain. It is really related to the regulatory sandbox, but also it has some differences. The LB chain combines 2 sandboxes, regulatory sandbox and technology sandbox. And here we are providing the FinTech companies with consultations from regulatory part of view and technological part of view. In this sandbox, the companies and FinTech startups can develop and test their innovative product based on blockchain technology. What is the main difference between regulatory sandbox and LB chain? That in regulatory sandbox, the company is allowed to have the contact with real consumers. They are really providing this innovative services on a limited environment. Usually we limit the number of consumers, and we agree on the conditions how the testing can be performed. In LB chain, the company is testing just in testing environment without any direct contact with real consumers. Why we created this project? Also, we had two main goals for that. One is to accelerate the development of blockchain-based solutions in the financial sector. Another goal is also for us to understand how this technology works, what is the impact of this technology, and how we can improve the quality of the regulation after we get this knowledge. We already finished all 3 phases of the project, and now we have launched the LB chain platform. Right now, we are working on the production side, and we are working actually in order to have the product in live to offer for fintech companies. So also there would be news in the future from us on that. The general vision, how we combine this LB chain project, there is the technological sandbox, regulatory sandbox, there the companies can test their innovation, and our licensing and newcomer program. As a regulator, actually, we want to have the framework which we can offer for different type of fintechs, and we want to create the environment where the fintech can find the right way to go into the market. For example, if it is a very early stage, the fintech can join our LB chain project and create the technological part of the product and service. After that, if necessary, apply for a license and test the innovation with real consumers. And if the testing is successful, then the fintech company can go in a wider scope and provide services in Lithuania and in all European Union after using the passporting regime. Also, we are not working only on creation of fintech-friendly environment, but we are working on initiatives internally on innovations, effectiveness, and digitalization. And here is the topic of RegTech and SupTech. There we also have a lot of initiatives. We have some experience on that, and of course, a long way to improve. How we see our role in RegTech, that is to apply RegTech solutions, for example, for reporting. Now we are applying RegTech solutions in licensing process. We have a licensing tool. We have dispute resolution tool. We are using robotic processes for our internal procedures as well. Another aspect how we see our role is that we propose to create the list of approved RegTech solutions in order to have better access to this market and to be sure and to easy for fintech companies to choose the right RegTech solution provider. And also we are working on fostering development of RegTech solutions in Lithuania. And here I would like to share the example of this initiative. In this slide, you can see the current situation regarding the reporting to Bank of Lithuania. As you probably know that all the licensed companies need to submit the reports for the Bank of Lithuania. So how it works in practice that each individual company prepares the reports, collect all the necessary information and submits to us. What we did together with our partners, we created the prototype and tested it. This prototype let us, as a regulator, through API, to access the data directly from the licensed company. Actually, this allows us to get all the necessary information without many works done by licensed company. They have more resources for being or for ensuring compliance requirements. So this is the prototype. We already tested that. And now we are working to do that live and to use that in more wider scale. And the final topic I want to cover and to share with you today is Centralink. Also, it is, I think, one of the most important advantages for fintech companies because when we are managing the payment system, we are allowing payment service providers to access our payment system and to be the direct participant of this scheme. So this means that we are providing the access not only for the banks, but for credit unions, electronic money or payment institutions, which are licensed in the European Economic Area. And this is the numbers showing that this possibility offered for fintech companies is used very actively. The fintechs, they are using this opportunity. They connect to our payment system, and the numbers are growing every year. So actually, we and the market see the advantages of this offering. So that's shortly what we are doing at the Bank of Lithuania. Of course, I have not covered all the tools which are created, but I think it led for you to understand the main direction of our work. And if you think you need to use one of these tools, please let us know, and we would be more than happy to discuss with you how we can go further. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dovile. Really very interesting presentation. We have two questions from participants. So I'm coming back to the first one which was addressed to Justas. If buying and selling cryptocurrency just using the e-money app and no entry or exit of crypto itself, is the EMI license sufficient, or should the company obtain some further licenses for the crypto specifically?
Yes, so here I need to actually note that Bank of Lithuania is not granting any authorizations for cryptocurrency exchangers. For all these questions, the companies need to contact Financial Crime Investigation Service in Lithuania and to discuss that, because we are not supervising crypto part. Talking about EMI's possibilities to provide such a services. Also, it is very important to know that we have published the position, official Bank of Lithuania position on crypto assets, which states that in general that our supervised companies, they cannot deal with crypto and hold the crypto assets in their balance. Of course, there are some conditions which need to be fulfilled. So there is a need actually for you to get acquainted with this position. If you could contact me, I will share the link to the position. It would be easier for you to find, but I think if you just Google that, you will find also easily. And my recommendation would be to start with this position and to check how your plans complies with the requirements we expressed here.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, a participant is asking, is there some practical guidance to obtaining the license, some materials?
Yes, as I mentioned, we have this newcomer program. So if you contact us through this program, we can share with you, but also it is published in our website. There is specifically dedicated page for newcomers. You will find that. Here is the information starting from very basic information. What are the services, how they are licensed, what license you need if you want to provide a specific type of service. Also, you would find more detailed information, how to obtain the specific license, and you will find the practical guidance, as I mentioned, based on the mistakes we see in the process. So this is the learning tool for you to avoid and not to duplicate the mistakes.
Okay, thank you. Maybe let me come back to the first question. The participant is clarifying, he's referring to the Revolut, who is having an evolved app, and it has a possibility to buy and sell cryptos, like usual ones. I think Bitcoin is one of them, and probably there are a couple of others. So you mentioned that, well, this is something kind of in this forbidden zone. But if other companies are doing that, is it the banking license that they should have, or EMI, or maybe they were just much more steps that they went through in order to get this kind of approval?
I'm not in a position actually, to comment the specific financial market participant. I think we can have the conversation on that, but as I mentioned, there is the general principle that it cannot be the crypto asset cannot be held in the balance. However, there are some conditions which needs to be fulfilled, and electronic money institutions it is not prohibited to provide services for crypto exchange companies. So I think that more detailed conditions could be found in the position I mentioned to you.
Okay, thank you. Another question, I'm not sure whether it should be addressed to you or to Justas, if we still have Justas participating. Participant is asking, if a company is having a mixed team of EU and non-EU residents, is there a way of obtaining any kind of startup visa or residence permit for non-EU employees if they're setting up a FinTech business in Lithuania? How does that work? Can you, Dovilė, answer that one?
Maybe this would be better to turn for Justas.
Are you still with us? Can you cover that topic? Justai?
Sure, yeah, very quickly. So we have a EU Blue Card. This is sort of equivalent of US Green Card. So very quickly, it gives ability for non-EU talent to come to Lithuania together with their families. So that not only gives us a permit to live in Lithuania, but also work-related permit, and that can be obtained within 1 month. And in more urgent cases, it can be obtained within a couple of weeks of time. So more information on that could be found on eubluecard.lithuania.com.
Great, thank you. Okay, maybe back to Dovilė. I have one question on my side. In your presentation, you were covering a lot of advantages, what can companies get from the Bank of Lithuania, all the support tools, etc. To me, it seems that, and you mentioned in your slides that recent Bank of Lithuania focus seems to shift towards one of the financial sector scourges of recent times, which is money laundering. Can you tell us more about the AML Center initiative and what impact will it have on the environment? What FinTech players can expect out of it?
Yes, Actually, I covered more topics on FinTech facilitating in our environment. However, we have another part of our job. We are working on risk mitigation, on compliance, and the supervision of all these segments. So anti-money laundering or money laundering is really the challenge which we see, especially when the market is growing, and now we are turning to the digital part of financial services. So we initiated the anti-money laundering center establishment in Lithuania, as we see it as a modern form of fighting against money laundering, which allows to bring together the efforts from both state institutions and market participants. Bank of Lithuania is one of the founder of this AML center. Also, the founders are Ministry of Finance and certain commercial banks operating in Lithuania, but other institutions as well, they take part in these activities. The main aims or goals of this AML center is to share the information on money laundering typologies, and actually to set up the information exchange platform for that, to carry out the studies, analysis, to prepare the guidelines and the recommendations, the legislative initiatives to improve the AML framework in Lithuania, and also to strengthen the competencies of public and private sector staff in this AML field. So we see that we cannot work alone each other, and the main idea is to bring our efforts in one place in order to have a really good framework to avoid any challenges in AML context.
Thank you, Dovile. So thanks a lot for the presentation. Let me then introduce our next speakers. We will have Tomas and Vytautas from Deloitte Lithuania. They will share their practice about obtaining license in Lithuania, about any pitfalls you may find along the way, and how to avoid them, how to have a smooth and successful process. So, Tomai, welcome.
Thank you, Mindaugas, for introduction, and also big thanks to Dovile and to Justas for not only sharing very interesting presentation, but also for doing very good job in attracting FinTech to Lithuania. So it results to quite a decent amount of interesting projects for us, for our FinTech team in Deloitte Lithuania. So I'm leading the legal practice here, and at the same time, I'm taking care of FinTech initiative. Currently in our team, we have about 20 people from legal, regulatory, risk advisory, financial advisory, IT, and some other functions. And we are rather busy with consulting clients on ongoing projects and advising on emergency situations like downgrades by the regulator, for instance. And definitely we help clients to get licenses. And this is our presentation where we want to share our experience on tips or basically do's and don'ts, how to have your presentation, your license application successful and smooth. Yeah, so before that, the first part will be about the licensing process as such. Then we can look at the lessons. And Vytautas, my colleague, will have a separate discussion about the importance of the business plan for the application. So let's have a look at the most popular business forms. because basically you need to know which license you apply for. So we have payment institution. I guess it's quite clear. So it provides payment services. Then we have e-money institution. So it's payment services plus e-wallet and settlement account service. We have a bank. We have conventional bank and as well a specialized or digital or FinTech bank, which is one of the key features of Lithuanian regulation. So it is the bank with most of activities of the conventional bank, except for some financial brokerage and some other limited services. But the key element is that the minimum capital requirement is reduced to 1 million euros, which is 5 times lower comparing to the traditional conventional bank requirement. And as in recent months, we receive more inquiries on financial brokerage firms. So I decided that we could talk about this business form as well. This may be used for Forex, may be used for STO exchange platform or for some other investment activities. Okay, here we may have a look at the licensing process. I prepared the same slide for all 4 forms, as the process is rather similar. We're starting from step 1, we call it as initial assessment. In this phase, basically, we're checking whether the client understanding on the business form is correct. In most of cases, we know what we're aiming for, whether it's payment institution, e-money, or other business form. But in some cases, we had the situations that, for instance, we had investors that we said, we want you all a service, and for that, we need a bank. So we needed to guide them a bit. And then we're jumping to stage 2, is the application on e-commerce program. So basically, Dovilė has provided very detailed explanation of the benefits. It is a must for the banks and optional, but very highly recommended for the other players seeking for the license. And we help to prepare to run the meeting with the Dovilė and or Dovilė's team smoothly. So we prepare the clients and guide through the process. And then step 3 is the main stage. So it is the preparation of application, preparation of a business plan, company establishment, and opening the cumulative bank account, transfer of funds. So all this process. When it is done, definitely you submit the license. And when you submit the license, you should expect the questions and comments from the regulator. In my practice, so maybe Dovilė could later on comment, I have not experienced any single case that the regulator would issue license without having some questions, comments, or interviews. What is very good is that we see this process very efficient, especially nowadays, and fast. In average, this assessment or application assessment process, I would say, takes about 3 months if the client does the diligent work. So after you submit the application, you receive information on the contact person from the Bank of Lithuania. Then in about 6 weeks, you expect first questions, comments from the bank. You have 2 weeks to respond. Then there is a second round, and hopefully everything is smoothly. The bank says that all answers addressed, all questions are addressed, and then you wait for the decision of the board of the Bank of Lithuania on the issue of the license. It may also take additional 1-2 months. So in general, it's very short time frame comparing to other European jurisdictions, or for instance to Singapore, where you need to wait, for quite a long period, counting not only in months but in years. Yeah, and after this step, you get your license, and it's a new start of your journey. Yes, and here I wanted to highlight some of the key elements that are critical for having the licensing process move and your road to the license easy and controllable. Just in our practice, let's say in the shortest term for getting the license, in that time it was EMI license. We managed to fit into 5 months from the moment we signed the contract with the client to the moment we got the application, the license for EMI. We are also having the projects, let's say, lasting 18 months or longer, and everything depends on the client. Good. Now, the first element is the project management, or I would say mandates from the stakeholders. Then, let's say 5, 6 years ago, when licensing Lithuania was becoming a FinTech hub, we had some kind of joke slogan from the client. We give money, you give license. So it's not the case. So it's a long process, and it requires commitment definitely from the consultant, but also from the client. So ideally, the specific person is appointed as a project manager from client side, and other people from key areas like IT, like regulatory, financial calculations are added to the team. From our side, we also allocate a team with one project manager coordinating and give access to SharePoint and let's say using our centralized methodology. Yeah, another element is a business plan. It is extremely important. I think without sound business plan, you cannot even apply for the license. And Vytautas, my colleague, will have a few slides on it, how to prepare it in decent way and how to avoid common mistakes. Deadlines for sure. There are some. Every project involves deadlines, internal and external ones, and definitely you shouldn't miss the external. So they may be time limits for incorporation of the company, the time to respond to the regulator, etc. Then we're coming to the UBOs, and we will have a couple of points, maybe 3. And we often receive a question from the investors: does UBO or do UBOs need to come from the FSI sector? Do they need to own experience in financial industry? Do they need to have the entities that are already licensed in some other European or other countries? The general answer is no, it is not a must. Of course, it is preferred. It adds additional benefit and trust from the regulator. But if you have the strong project team, if you have the strong corporate governance structure and nomination of experienced people, plus a solid business plan, so UBOs can be, let's say, from different sector than FSI. What the investors should avoid is the let's say hidden or complex ownership structures. So try to involve trusts. Try to avoid trusts or some exotic jurisdictions like Seychelles, British or others in a holding structure towards the Lithuanian company. The simpler the better. And be prepared to evidence the source of funds, their origin, and legality and the fact of payment of taxes. So, for instance, if the Lithuanian company's capital is funded from dividends of the, let's say, group company, you need audited financial statements of that company. You need shareholder resolution to pay dividends. You need also tax returns, copies of the tax returns preferably, and copies of wire transfer documentation. And it is better to do a pre-assessment exercise of the source of the funds before you submit the documents to the regulator. Competitive advantages. So these are asked by the Bank of Lithuania, and you may be challenged. And I guess Vytautas could comment it in talking about the business plan. Another tricky question, which definitely we will hear, is linked to Lithuania or why Lithuania. So you need to substantiate the reasons, and the fact that Lithuania has friendly environment, it's relatively easy to get a license, would hardly work. So either it should be the market link to Lithuania, or you are planning to have the back office or front office functions, or part of them here. Otherwise, you may face problems for your way to the license. Then we're coming to the governance and the need for local talent, again, Lithuanian element. So we have the regulations on the governance. It differs, the type of the business form. So for PIs and TMIs, there is one setup. For financial brokerage firm, similar one. More complicated is for the banks, and so you need to comply with that. And at least 3 positions, so CEO or deputy CEO, ML officer and compliance officer, should be held by people speaking Lithuanian language, meaning by local team, because Lithuanian language is not an easy to learn. Yes, risk management structure, so clear procedures, policies, and alignment with the business plan. Also, IT architecture and IT procedures form very important part of it. We have separate annexes in application for it, so please pay due attention to it. And the last but not least is the cooperation with the regulator. So as you have heard from the vision, so the regulator is quite open and keen to communicate, and appoints decent resources. At the same time, they expect transparency from your side and communication from your side. So for instance, let's say, don't hide your real activity from the ones you list in the business plan, or just maybe to end with a positive example. If you feel that due to COVID restrictions, you are delaying in getting some criminal clearance certificate with apostille from exotic country, so inform the regulator in advance and ask for extension of the deadline, and most likely you'll succeed. So these would be my key observations. And now I am handing over the presentation to Vytautas, which will talk about the business plan, the regulatory part of it, which is very, very important for your license application. So Vytautas, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you very much, Thomas, for a very interesting first part of the presentation. I will cover, as you mentioned, mainly the business plan, and will focus on 3 areas of it. So firstly, we'll try to cover the key building blocks, what should comprise the business plan. Secondly, we'll walk through a few of the most commonly met mistakes in our practice. And thirdly, we'll provide a couple of tips which hopefully will make your business plan application successful. Just briefly about myself, I am Vytautas Čepas. currently assistant director within financial advisory practice in the Lithuanian office. I have started my career over 10 years ago in Deloitte in London. And for the past 3 years, I have been mainly focused on assisting clients to prepare business plans for various purposes, both internal planning purposes, fundraising purposes, and also regulatory purposes. So in this presentation, we will focus on the regulatory aspect of a successful business plan. So let me first cover the key building blocks, what a successful business plan should cover. You should start with a market analysis. Market analysis is critical because it provides the context for all the remaining building blocks of the business plan. You have to take into account what the market trends look like, what the market is like, what the competition is in the market, what price pressures you might face, and understanding this whole situation, then you move forwards and describe the products and services that you will provide to your customers. And this is basically focused on what problems do you want to solve for your customers, or what needs do you see in the market need to be filled. Because only after identifying the opportunity, you should attempt to identify the products and solutions that you want to offer. Next, it is very important to think about your customers. Because in the value proposition, you identify what you're going to offer. You also must think about who you are going to offer those services, because they might differ a lot depending on your target audience. So key questions that you should cover in this area are the size of the customers. So are these big or small? The type of the customers. Are these business clients or individual clients? What is their financial standing? What sectors do they operate in? Is it more risky ones or less risky ones? Moving forwards, you need to think about the marketing plan as a communication tool between the value proposition and customers. So if you want to onboard a lot of new customers, you need to think about the promotion channels that you're going to spread the idea of your services, how you're going to solve the problems or the needs of your customers. Human capital, of course, is critical in every business, because people drive the results. And in this area, you should cover the key topics such as organizational structure, the key roles and profiles of the most important executives, also the development of personnel over the 3 years period in the business plan. IT is also critical, because you are a FinTech company, so the offering that you're going to propose is going to be very much based on the technologies that you're going to have in your company, or you're going to outsource. And here it is critical to explain the architecture of the whole of your system and how the offering is going to work operationally through the technology. Revenue drivers and the cost drivers, these are factors which impact how successful your business is going to be, depending on certain assumptions. So for revenue drivers, we should think about number of clients, which is the most single critical variable in the whole financial model, but also about the transaction volumes, about the geographies you're going to target, about the type of clients, and so on and so forth. The cost drivers, these are direct costs. So for example, for various payment transactions, you have SEPA or SWIFT costs to implement them, but also you have usually a big chunk of operational expenses, which make up a large portion of your total costs, meaning that scaling your business is usually very positively influencing your financial results. And finally, it is critical in the business plan to cover the capital adequacy criteria. This is determined by certain legislation in Lithuania, but also at the European level, and it establishes the critical amount of capital that the business needs before it starts the operations. Just bear in mind that capital adequacy ratio is not sufficient if you have just above 1. Usually it is necessary, and the regulator asks via various comments to increase it, so you would have it at least over 1.3, 1.4, even in stress case scenario. So all of these components make a regulatory business plan, which we think cover most critical parts and would help you to make it successful. What is important to mention is that the bottom 3 boxes are usually done in a financial model, which also takes into account various scenarios, so the pessimistic, optimistic base scenario, and for which the results do flow into the business plan. Okay, so now that we covered all the critical components of the business plan, let's see what are the common pitfalls that applicants face when preparing their applications. This should help you to avoid them in your applications. The first one is what Thomas already mentioned, is the cooperation from the client, which sometimes seems that the client wants to do the project as soon as possible and get the license in 3 or 6 months. However, when the cooperation process starts, there is no one responsible for the preparation of the information, no one accountable for the meetings, the timelines, or the scope of work that needs to be done from the client side. So it's very important to make realistic deadlines, but to make some deadlines and to make some requirements which would be communicated upfront and agreed. It is critical to have a consistent story across all of your application documents. Business plan, I look at it as a core document around which all the other documents float. And to ensure that it is consistent, you definitely need to go through all the application files and see that each of the separate documents reinforce the key ideas that you provide in the business plan. For example, if you have a organizational structure in 3 different places, that is in the financial model, in the business plan, in the annexes, and it all shows different numbers, different roles, that is very harmful to the credibility of your business plan. So make sure you make it consistent. Lack of clarity is also one of the pitfalls that we notice. Usually it reflects badly on the leadership of the company, which is the applicant. If you don't know what you're aiming for in 3 or 5 years, if you don't have clear objectives and KPIs to monitor those objectives, it's very unlikely you will succeed to reach them, and the regulator understands that and pays quite detailed attention to whether it has been covered in the business plan. A lot of applicants make a mistake of applying too much expert judgment on the assumptions which are the basis for their financial calculations. These assumptions range from an extremely high numbers of onboarded clients from day one, once the license is received, without taking into consideration the time period that the applicant needs to build up the whole operation in a new country, in a new market environment. It also has to look into the market. You cannot expect the same results in a market with 3 million people when you're making assumptions and sort of imply that you're going to operate under 40 million people population. And finally, we noticed that a majority of applicants have no problem of forecasting the profit and loss account, so the revenues and the profits of their business for the first 3 years. However, what we noticed was that forecasting the balance sheet is much more difficult, and not many clients have the capability or have the experience to do that. We also see that capital adequacy calculation is quite a technical matter, and it is also, let's say, not very well understood by the applicants, and needs to be paid more attention to. Okay, and moving to the last portion of my presentation, I would like to leave you with a couple of tips which hopefully will make your business plan more successful. So firstly, tell a very clear and concise story. Count every word and think that less is more. Nobody likes fluff, and if you start talking in the executive summary about how your organization is a sip of fresh air, as we had some examples in our experience, this is not going to make your application look credible. Secondly, focus on the reader. Think who is your target audience. In this case, it's all about the regulator. You're preparing a business plan for the regulator. Think what's important for them. So as Dovile already mentioned, they are mostly focused on risk management. They're also focused on the quality of the application. So definitely spare their time with to the point, concise business plan, identifying risks, and showing how you're going to solve them. Be consistent. This is important because it builds credibility through various documents and makes your story much more successful if it is reiterated via different information sources. Market context is critical because, as we know, no business operates in a vacuum. That means that your actions as an payment or electronic money institution or a bank would depend on the competitors, on the market trends, on the pricing pressures, and on the actions of the whole economy, probably. So bear this in mind and do describe it in the business plan. And finally, let's say last but not least, prepare to defend all of your assumptions. These are the basis for your financial forecasts. Be more conservative because you know that Bank of Lithuania is more conservative. And also ensure that you have an argument for each of these assumptions. We usually recommend our clients to create a list of all of the assumptions which went through the calculations and have an argument ready before you submit the application. So this is it from my side. In case you would like to discuss any of these topics later on, you can definitely take this offline and contact myself, or you can ask any questions now. Together with Thomas, we're very happy to answer any of your questions.
Okay, so thanks, Tommy, thanks, Vytautai. We have a couple of questions from the participants. One question is, how much does it cost for Deloitte to help prepare EMI license in a ballpark figure? And here maybe I can answer that question myself. I may sound as a diplomat or somebody who try to avoid the answer, but really it very much depends. It depends on the part that the client wants to cover us and parts that the client wants to cover himself or themselves, let's say. Specifically, IT is a very broad area, and depending on what part client would be covering themselves, can have a very significant part on the estimate. Maybe Tommy, you can add yourself, or you to add yourself to what really constitutes the pricing mechanism. It's really, I mean, we could indicate a range, but that range would be really very wide and probably would not tell much. Tommy, maybe you can comment more.
Yes, I can comment. I think that we can differ. This range is from 30 to 60K, I would say, and mostly depends on the cooperation of the client and then how much it is willing to take on their own and how much he is prepared. Because in some cases, you know, they already have the licenses and we are moving the licenses, so then it's easier. But if it's a new startup, if it's a new idea and people are learning, and then it's a bit different involvement is needed from our side.
Maybe just to add from my side, from experience, we see that let's say preparing an application from scratch is probably a more efficient way than preparing an application from already the application that the applicant has prepared. Because usually the changes that we need to make along the way changes also the structure, and also there are areas where we have to add but also see that the whole business plan is consistent. So we much more prefer to be from the start together with the client and understand their objectives, understand their vision, discuss various topics up front, and only then start building together a business plan with a financial model instead of jumping on the already existing information and trying to make it work.
Okay, thanks, guys. Another question on the source of funds. So let's say they are coming, Tommy, maybe it's a question to you as our legal expert. They're coming from Bitcoin, which was bought 8 years ago. And as a proof, the owners can provide statement from, let's say, some Bitcoin exchange, Bitstamp. Would that be okay, or do you think the client will have challenges from the regulator?
I think it's a second answer, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, that would be a bit different story. So also the questionable things are also from the borrowed or mixed funds, or when the funds are generated from, let's say, unclear transactions. So once again, no, the more transparent we way, so the easier it is.
Okay, thanks. Couple of additional questions. Which assumptions are most difficult to defend in front of the Bank of Lithuania? And how then to best prepare or be ready to meet that challenge in your experience? Just take one, probably most difficult one.
I think the key assumption which is being challenged every time is the number of customers that you onboard in the first, second, third quarters of the start of the operations after you receive the license. So the way usually that it is defendable. You can either have a client base already with your other entities operating somewhere. B, you can have some preliminary agreements that you can provide to the Bank of Lithuania and say, look, we already have clear intentions from the following clients who would like to onboard. But probably the most common or usual way of answering this question would be, if you don't have the first two options, which are of course the best, would be to show reasonable numbers. That means that you're not gonna onboard thousands of clients from day one. So you have probably to take a couple of quarters showing no clients at all, and that's the approach that Bank of Lithuania usually prefers. So you show 2 quarters or 3 quarters with no clients at all, but you prepare the marketing, you prepare the operations, you start your brand building, and later on you show what sort of portion of the market and what segment you're gonna target mostly, and then you take a reasonable number. There is no right or wrong answer. This is still the client's business, so nobody can argue with that. But just you have to take the market context into the consideration, as I mentioned in my presentation.
Okay, so thank you, colleagues. We are a bit behind the schedule. So let us now have a short break. We were intending to have 20 minutes break, but let's maybe keep to the schedule and let's have a short 10 minutes break. And let's come back, okay, Eastern European time, that would be 12:40, London time, that would be 10:40. So basically in around 10 minutes. Thank you and hope to see you back. So welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a chance to refresh a bit during the break. Our next speaker is Victoria from our Deloitte tax department. She will be talking about corporate income tax cases and matters to consider when moving businesses to Lithuania and what can you expect in Lithuania, what's the regime. So Victoria, welcome, and the word over to you.
Hello, Mindaugas. Hello, everybody. I hope everybody managed to come back from their break. So as Mindaugas introduced me, I am Victoria Daniele, M&A and International Tax Leader at Deloitte, Lithuania. And today, I will spend some time to give you a brief overview of corporate tax landscape in Lithuania. My clicker doesn't work. Oh, here it goes. So I'm back. Clicker's working. Always after the break, some interruptions happen. So hopefully everything goes smoothly now. As I mentioned, I'll briefly introduce a corporate landscape in Lithuania, touching upon statutory regulations and incentives available in a corporate tax law, as well as international tax rules any business operating in Lithuania should consider. So moving forward, Lithuania statutory corporate income tax rate is 15%, which is relatively low compared to other European jurisdictions. And in addition to that, Lithuanian corporate income tax law provides for quite a few tax incentives, which allows to reduce corporate income tax rate even further. Also, Lithuanian corporate income tax law has tax loss utilization provisions, which basically says that if a business, let's say during its first year of incorporation or operation, incurs tax loss, this tax loss could be carried forward for a limited period of time, meaning that if during your first or second year of operations you had a tax loss, you can easily carry it forward to the upcoming tax periods and reduce your tax profit, so it's not gone. Also, if you have more than one operating entity in Lithuania, Lithuanian tax regime provides for tax loss grouping. So if you have one Lithuanian entity which is in a tax loss making position, you can transfer that tax loss to your other operating Lithuanian entity to set off its taxable profit. Also, Lithuania has a favorable regime in terms of taxation of dividends received. So any dividends received from entities established in European Economic Area are tax exempt. If dividends are received from entities established outside of European Economic Area, they could be also tax exempt if the paying entity has at least 10% of Lithuanian entity shares and holds those shares for at least 12 months. Another good instrument we have in Lithuania in terms of taxation is availability of tax rulings. So any new investor coming to Lithuania having any ambiguity in terms of its taxation of operations could go to the tax authority and apply for clarification on a certain matter of taxation. And this clarification could be obtained either as a non-binding ruling, binding ruling, or advanced pricing application, basically, which would give you certainty on tax matters related to your specific question. In addition to statutory corporate income tax rate payable in Lithuania, Lithuanian entities might be subject to so-called withholding tax rate. And this tax is applied on payments outside of Lithuania. Usually, investors coming to Lithuania, they have a bigger group somewhere outside of Lithuania. And there are transactions between Lithuanian and foreign entities, such as dividend payment, interest payment, royalties. So basically, what the Lithuanian tax law foresees that any dividend payment from Lithuania to a foreign investor would be exempt of withholding tax if that investor holds at least 10% of shares in Lithuanian entity. If Lithuanian entity is paying interest to its group company which financed the activities of the Lithuanian entity, that interest would also be withholding tax exempt if the payments are made to entity established in European Economic Area entity or entity is established in a country with which Lithuania has double tax treaty. And I will, on the second slide, on the further slide in my presentation, I will show you the map basically highlighting all the countries with which Lithuania has double tax treaty, and it's 56 of those. In terms of withholding tax on royalties, Lithuania also provides for certain exemptions. So if royalties are paid to a group entity established in European Union, and there is an indirect or direct holding between those entities of 25%, and the payment is made to a beneficial owner of royalties, then such royalties would be withholding tax exempt as well. Also, even if royalties are paid to non-related party, but the other party is in a country with which Lithuania has concluded a double tax treaty, we have quite a few treaties with favorable regimes setting out that withholding tax on royalties does not apply. I also included management and service fees within the withholding tax regime, but it's basically to highlight that we do not have any withholding tax on those as opposed to other European jurisdictions with, in certain cases, applies withholding tax on service payments from one jurisdiction to another. Yes, so moving to the map. Moving to the map. So the dark green is basically the territories with which Lithuania has concluded a double tax treaty. And the lighter green territories are the ones with which Lithuania has concluded a double tax treaty and which provides for a favorable regime on royalty payments, meaning that payments to those jurisdictions would be exempt of withholding tax. And those countries are, as example, Ireland, Belgium, United Kingdom, Luxembourg, Canada, Netherlands, Switzerland. So quite a few of those which do not raise any withholding tax on royalty payments. As any business, any new business coming to Lithuania, or any business operating in Lithuania, financing would be one of the questions of the interest. And Lithuanian corporate income tax rules provides for certain rules on interest deductibility. First of those rules is fin capitalization rules, basically, which says that if an entity has a loan from a related party and that loan is higher than entity's equity times 4, interest on the excess of loan would be non-deductible. But if that entity has a proper transfer pricing documentation and could prove that interest from related party was obtained at the market conditions, then even such interest could be deducted for corporate income tax calculation purposes. Other rules on the interest deduction is EBITDA rules. These rules, as opposed to fin capitalization rules, do not only apply to related parties, but also to non-related party loans, such as bank financing and similar financing instruments. Those rules basically says that any interest in difference between interest income and interest expenses in excess of 3 million or 30% of company's EBITDA is non-deductible. These rules do not apply for financial institutions. So if you are operating as a financial institution having license in Lithuania, these rules would not apply to you. But if, let's say, you decide to establish an R&D center in Lithuania without any licensing as a financial institution, then you should consider these rules then deciding on the financing structure in Lithuania. Good news on EBITDA rules is that any non-deducted interest could be carried forward for unlimited period of time and deducted later than calculated corporate income tax. Moving to the most interesting topic for all newcomers to Lithuania is the availability of corporate income tax incentives. And I mentioned, if applied properly, the entity could reduce its corporate income tax rate from 15 to close to 0 or even 0. So first of the incentives I would like to cover is investment project incentive, and it basically allows deduction of cost of newly acquired qualifying assets. And those could be, if it's a first year of operation, any qualifying assets that were acquired to establish the business. So software, hardware, IPs acquired into Lithuania. So these costs could be used to deduct from profitable tax, from tax profit twice. So basically once through depreciation and the second time through additional profit deduction. One thing to consider is if you have a tax loss, you could not use this incentive. However, the acquisition cost of the asset could be carried forward for 4 years. So if, let's say, during first year of acquisition, you are in a tax loss position, but in the second year you are profitable, you can easily utilize this tax incentive. The second incentive that is available to companies operating in Lithuania is R&D incentive, and it basically allows triple deduction of expenses incurred during R&D activities. As opposed to investment project incentive, this incentive allows entities to increase its tax loss. So even if you are in a tax loss position, you can apply this incentive and even further increase your tax loss, which could later be used to set off your tax profit once you become profitable in a further operations of your activities. The important thing to consider before applying R&D incentive is to make sure that your activity classifies as such. So basically it has to have an element of novelty. Good news is that if you are not sure if the activities you're conducting could be classified as R&D incentive, you can apply for a clarification from an agency of science, innovation, and technology, and they, analyzing your application, will give a conclusion whether it is an R&D activity you are conducting or whether it's not. Once you have a clarification from an agency, then that's for certain. If it's a positive answer, you can apply R&D incentive and you would not have any issues with the Lithuanian tax authority in the future. Another incentive closely related to R&D incentive is IP commercialization. So basically, if you have an R&D center in Lithuania developing a technology, and that development costs classifies as R&D cost, and as a result of R&D activity, you have an asset which could be used to earn income. Any profit from that asset would be taxed at a reduced rate of 5% and not 15% as a standard rate. The only criteria is that R&D activities has to be conducted in Lithuania, and the Lithuanian entity has to be a profit-generating entity. And the asset you created has to be either software protected by copyright or other patentable assets. So as you can see, we have quite a few incentives that could be used to basically reduce your corporate income tax in Lithuania significantly. As I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, then I talked about interest rates, that even if your interest is exceeding 4:1 debt to equity ratio, you could get a full interest deduction if you have a proper transfer documentation substantiating that interest. And in Lithuania, the rules provide that this documentation is mandatory if annual revenue of the entity is 3 million euros or more, and transactions with related parties exceeds 90,000 per transaction or per group of similar transactions. Master file is required only for larger entities with annual revenue exceeding 15 million euros. So these are the general guidelines. Then the transfer pricing is mandatory. However, you could have it done voluntarily, let's say if you're not exceeding the thresholds, but would like to substantiate your interest rate paid to a related party. Also, another important aspect why transfer pricing should be considered then having a business in Lithuania, especially a business with having an IP, it would help you to determine the profit level to be taxed in Lithuania. And historically, majority of the profits were taxed at IP owner level. But since the implementation of BEPS and new transfer pricing rules on pricing of intangibles, the new exercise as DEMPE analysis has to be conducted, and basically value drivers has to be determined within whole chain of the group entities to determine the function of each entity in terms of developing IP, enhancing IP, maintaining IP, using IP to earn income. And then each entity, depending on the input, on its own input, should receive appropriate profitability level at the specific country. Also, as part of international rules and BEPS implementation, we have certain tax anti-avoidance rules in Lithuania. I will not cover all of those, but the major one I would highly recommend to consider is exit taxation on assets transfer. And why this one is basically that then setting up the group structure and determining where your R&D center should be or is already, you would need to determine who would be your IP owner and who would be responsible for IP development. Because let's say if you develop your technology and IP in Lithuania, and at some point in time decide that your group IP centers should be Canada and all IP rights will be registered there, then the transfer of IP, even if it's not a legal transfer, meaning that you don't have any sales purchase agreement for that IP transfer, that transfer would be taxed in Lithuania on the fair value of IP at that moment. So if you would need to make a transfer, better to make it early in the process, then value of IP is not as high, or just choose the jurisdiction at the early stage of your activities already where the IP will be registered. And just to sum up and key points to take away, perhaps then thinking about establishing business in Lithuania or doing business in Lithuania, or if already doing business in Lithuania, is think about your financing structure, so that to avoid any unnecessary loss of interest deduction. Think about IP jurisdiction and whether you will choose it based on the legal protection of IP or tax incentives available. But it has to be chosen to avoid any further tax consequences later on. Substantiate all your related party transactions to make sure that every entity contributing to value creation is remunerated, so that to avoid any tax disputes later on. And please identify any transactions with foreign entities and to understand whether those could give you any withholding tax obligations. And if they do, perhaps you could use and utilize tax incentives or exemptions available to reduce those. These are key takeaway points, and I'm happy to answer any questions you or Mindaugas might have.
Victoria, thank you for the presentation. As we are running a bit out of time, and I see we don't have any questions coming from the participants, so I will thank you. And we will not ask you anything for now. If participants have any questions, I suggest them reaching out directly to Victoria, who can provide answers to any question of international taxation on transferring business or anything related to starting up a FinTech business. So thank you, Victoria.
Thank you all, and have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you. So for our last two presentations, we have speakers from businesses who have already licensed their activities. First speaker is Saulius from Deloitte. He will talk about his journey in obtaining the license, how it went. In the first part, we had we shared knowledge from Deloitte, how we see some points, and now it is a good chance to see how does the company feel going through that process. So I want to welcome Saulius, and the word over to you.
Hi everyone. I'm representing Deloitte, very recently licensed electronic money institution in Lithuania, and I'll speak about our trip and make some comparison to like climbing to the mountains of regulated financial business. So let me share you some information how it went, what takeovers we got from it. Okay. So the business idea came a year ago, maybe a bit more than a year ago, from our shareholders who are based in Asia, and they have a very good and broad experience in developing IT products for financial service companies. And the idea is that the main idea was that financial institutions, financial companies, they have customers coming from all over the world, and there is a need of payment service providers to make transactions worldwide, not only like regionally in Europe, for example, but also to have ability to send and receive money kind of in a very efficient way across the continent. So the idea was that having EMI could solve these problems of financial participants, and having in mind that IT products were developed for many companies across the world, there was actual good next step to establish a company which would serve those customers in order to provide financial services. And also, currently, and especially in COVID-19 atmosphere, when e-commerce businesses are booming, this is kind of very good also potential we see across. So this is basically the initial idea of shareholders to have our own payment service company, which would serve this those different target customers. And moving forward, so founders of the company explored different markets for EMI license, and one of the potential market was United Kingdom, which is still currently one of the key fintech hubs in Europe. However, because of the Brexit, it's more difficult to make transactions, especially in euros, from United Kingdom, and to serve customers in continental Europe. Therefore, other markets as well were explored, and Germany, as the biggest continental country, so was explored. However, in Germany, regulator is not so friendly, I would say, in this sense that they don't accept documents in English, and so they are kind of closed market in a way. The second was Luxembourg. The third one was Luxembourg, which explored. So Luxembourg is kind of good also in the hub. However, costs in Luxembourg are kind of high. The talent pool is very narrow, and in this case, Luxembourg was not chosen. For other options, Cyprus was explored as well, because in Cyprus there are many, how to say, high-risk customers base, and could be the potential for payment service providers to offer services. But in Cyprus, there is, again, problems, I would say, with the regulator, that it's not so welcoming for newcomers. And then Malta, where a lot of regulated business are established, gaming companies, other high-risk customers are based. So in Malta, founders even established a company, and they hired the consultant to go ahead and get a license. But the process was not that smooth, because the consultants were, I would say, maybe I cannot say that lazy, but they were not very active in a way, providing information, servicing the needs of the customers, and not very active. So founders decided maybe it's not worth spending money and time, which is a very important resource. So how about going north and explore Estonia, which is very well known for e-residency, for crypto businesses, licensing, and so on. But in Estonia, the setup of electronic money institutions is not there yet. And here came Lithuania. As for Lithuania, so the first meetings happened with the founders when they heard about Lithuania. It happened in Singapore, FinTech Festival, where Bank of Lithuania representatives, actually Deloitte, and also representatives from Invest Lithuania, Rugile, were participating. And they provided very, how to say, friendly attitude, welcoming attitude towards explaining what is required from EMI, what is required from shareholders, what is required from capital side. So all of this made very warm impression. And because of this meeting, so it happened on 2019 November. After a month, founders decided to come to Lithuania and attend FinTech Festival here in Lithuania to see what is currently the situation, what is the setup, you know, how FinTech environment looks in our country. And after this meeting, founders decided that this is a good place to be. Very welcoming, as I mentioned, regulator. You can submit documents in English, good talent pool, kind of relatively low employment costs. So based on this, it was decided to establish a company. So then the next stage happened, the preparation stage. So during the preparation stage, we had the high-level idea, right? So what kind of customers we want to serve? And Deloitte will serve business customers. We will serve merchants involved in e-commerce businesses and or providing financial services. So having this in mind, so we decided to build our own, you know, structure of products. What kind of products we will offer? So basically issuing IBANs, offering international payments, which is very important. We will provide FX services. For e-commerce businesses, it's really important to have payment gateway to acquire credit card payments, to have alternative payment methods, and to have payment initiation, which is kind of under the PSD2 directive, really important. So all of these products were, when we defined the product, we tried to set the list of systems we need to have within the company, meaning who will be our core banking provider, how we will identify customers, how we will screen those customers, and how later on we will monitor the transaction. What kind of payment gateway we will have? Do we have to build our own? Maybe we can use some private label solution. So now we have listed all those, you know, very important in business, I would say, strategic points. So started to look for the partners who can be our unique partners we will work with, not only for a couple of months, but later on. So then after this stage, we already built some business plan, high-level business plan, which we wanted to present for the Bank of Lithuania. And here we met again with Dovilė, which is responsible for newcomers program in Bank of Lithuania. And she approved. So let me show you just a slide where we, what kind of stages we went through in order to get where we are now. So yeah. Okay. So we started in January. So the company founders appointed CEO, and then we set the objectives, what we wanted to achieve. So as I mentioned, we set a list of products, customers, systems, partners, potential, which we will use. And February, we met with Bank of Lithuania, presented our business plan, and we got a green light to go forward. So we started collecting important information which is needed for the consultants to submit the application to the Bank of Lithuania. And this is, involves a lot of like, who are the UBOs? What is the source of fund? How does it come from? How we will, manage all our risks? So all of these questions we started to prepare for, and then during the March we started building our company identity, Demovault as a brand, how we see it, where we want to be in the next couple of months. And before the application to the Bank of Lithuania, it is really important to have to identify the potential partners, because during with the application you have to submit, the contracts of potential already agreed contracts with potential vendors. So we started investigating core banking system. In the market, you can find a lot of many solutions with which are, one systems are built for business customers, other systems are built for retail customers. So there are good things and bad things to have in mind. So we decided to go with one banking system provider, and we signed the contract. So we were ready for basically from this end to submit the document. And then in Lithuania, during April, COVID-19 hit, and not only Lithuania, but also in the whole world. And the documentation, to gather all documentation and send across the world, it took more time than expected. I think we could submit documents to the Bank of Lithuania even sooner, but due to some delays when sending apostilled documents from one part of the world to another part, it took more time than expected. However, the documents were reviewed, which were presented by the consultants, and we had a kind of green light. So we established company Demovault in May 2020, and after establishing the company, we were ready to submit the documents. So application to the Bank of Lithuania was submitted on 3rd of June, and we were then waiting for a couple of weeks to get a response from Bank of Lithuania. Just one moment, which I wanted to highlight, the company director was not the only one from Demovault side, but we started to employ customers already before the pre-application stage, in order to have the good competence within the company. So we hired CTO and AML manager, which is kind of really important two functions for the company like ours. As a CTO, which his main duties are, to overlook the contracts with potential vendors, and EML is the second hot topic, which is important for the Bank of Lithuania when assessing the application. So you have to be ready to receive many questions regarding AML and ML rules. Okay, so now after submission, we received questions from the Bank of Lithuania, and fun facts just stated in my slide that we had 2 rounds. During the first round, we received 57 questions, and it was given 2 weeks to answer those questions. The questions involved different topics, which were how we will manage ML rules, what kind of enhanced due diligence we will do, who will be our potential customers, can we name already the potential customers. We had questions on our business plan, on our financial side as well. So we had to be ready, and we had to be very quick in order to answer. So as you see, it's 2 + 2. So we asked for extension for two more weeks to answer those questions. From my experience and from what I hear in the market right now, that this amount of 57 questions was not a lot, because other applicants, they received even more, like 20 pages of different questions. So the better you prepare at the beginning, the smoother the next rounds will be. So I believe that this kind of amount of questions was not that big for us. And so those questions we received about mid-July, as I reckon. So it took like a month for Bank of Lithuania to overlook our submitted documents and come back with the questions. So okay, so after we answered those questions, there was an interview with the Bank of Lithuania, which was more about the team, to get to know each other, to get to know more about the business we plan to do, and it was kind of very familiar, I would say, kind of very open interview. So after this interview, just after a couple of weeks, we received the second round of questions. And as you see, the number of questions decreased a lot, up to 14. And it was given, again, 2 weeks to answer those questions. So after the second round, Bank of Lithuania came back to us again and asked to increase our capital. And talking about capital is really important here, because the official capital requirement by the Bank of Lithuania is 350 for EMI business, but it is the official one. And in real life, the capital has to be much higher, because you have to cover costs not only before you get licensed, but also after you get licensed. You don't start business from the day one you get licensed. So Bank of Lithuania takes this into account, and they ask to provide, the stable financial documents, and also stable business plan and calculations on where you're gonna be in half a year after the license will be issued, or even more, and when you reach the break-even. If the Bank of Lithuania sees that there is some lack, let's say so, they ask to increase the capital. In our case, it was to increase 10% from our initial capital, and we had just a couple of days, I would say, to fulfill this requirement. It was good that it was not that pressure for our shareholders, and we could just submit the required documents on source of funds and transfer money kind of easily, so it was good. But other companies which does not have, let's say, stable financial situation, it could be the issue. So if you're applying for the license, take this into account. Okay. So where we stand right now, and what would be the takeovers from our end? What do we see? is most important key for success. So key for success is to have very clear business idea, which you can list on a paper, and you can also present it to the Bank of Lithuania, and Bank of Lithuania could understand it. As Dovilė mentioned during her presentation today, they receive many, many applications, and only a small part of it gets a license at the end of the day. So from the beginning, you have to state it, and each day you have to live with this idea. The second important thing is to have a very strong internal team. And this is, I would say, this was one of the key reasons why it took only 5 months for us to receive the license, that from the day one, we already had part of the team within the organization. As I mentioned, CTO and AML manager. Again, one more very important point is to have close partnership with consultants. Try not to keep information for yourself. Be open, disclose it, and be active. Once you get the list of questions from the consultants, you have to act fast, because it will, it depends how fast you will receive the license. And fourth very important thing is strong capital base. Documents presenting the source of funds, they are really important, and you will be asked to present it to the Bank of Lithuania, and they will go very deep with this. Okay, so we received license November 26th last year, and now it's already February. So what's next? After you receive license, especially when you build your business model on getting access to the central link or other providers, so you are, again, you have to submit documents to the Bank of Lithuania to get access to the SEPA system. It is not at the moment you get the license, you just get actual license to work, but you cannot process payments yet. If your business plan was built on a connection to SEPA payment scheme. So you again submit documents, you wait for some time, and it can take several months. It can take even a half a year. So once you build your business plan, take this into account. So this is kind of our takeover. And what's next as well? So have plan B. What if you don't get connection to the central link? What if you don't get bank partners does not open accounts for you? So how you will process payments? Maybe cooperations with other fintech companies are needed. So how you will issue your IBAN accounts? So these are very important topics to think of. Also, again, one more thing is hiring people. Start hiring people not at the moment when you get the license, but try to search in advance. From our experience, it takes more than a month, I would say, to hire a person with required skills and to onboard the person, to go into the targets, to set the targets, and especially when you are a startup, those persons have to be kind of proactive. So these are very, very important topics. In our plan, we think that we will launch operations in the next couple months. So I would say it is kind of fast. And yeah, thank you very much.
Paulo, many thanks for this detailed and I would say down-to-earth presentation, for sharing all the practical examples. I myself enjoyed it a lot. I hope that participants of the conference also enjoyed it quite a bit. I don't see any questions from the participants. I just wanted to ask on my side, what was the most challenging part or maybe unexpected hindrance during the application process, and how did you solve it?
Okay, so as I mentioned during the presentation, one of unexpected things was to increase the capital, and we had to act kind of fast. So this was kind of unexpected surprise, but we filled it. And I want to share this with other participants. So please be aware and have it in your financial planning.
Okay, thank you very much. From my side, I can add that from my experience, also capital is one of the key questions. And I had cases in my experience when the company was starting from 350,000, which is minimum for an EMI license. But after several revisions of the business plan, and especially the stress case scenarios, it was increased 2-3 times. So I am fully here with you.
Maybe one more thing to add, because the Bank of Lithuania is currently receiving a lot of applications, they are now focusing more and more on ML issues. So have strong personnel within this function, and start from even not day one, but ahead.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and I wanted to move to our last presentation. Also, it will be an experience sharing session from the Estonian company. And I want to welcome Mihkel from Estate Guru, as well as my Deloitte Estonia colleague, Agur. Welcome, the stage is yours.
Thank you, and welcome to all participants. Thanks for having us here. I'm Agur from Deloitte Tallinn office, and I'm leading here our next technology hub, focusing mainly on innovation, on digitalization, agile product development, and issues like that. Before I joined Deloitte about a year ago, I was working for a number of different FinTech and banking companies, helping them with their digitalization activities. And I was also co-founding one FinTech marketplace for Latin American credit markets. So I've seen the regulation part from here in UA, EU, but also a bit further on really developing markets. And during those times, the one thing which I really learned is that if you are building a fast-growing FinTech company, then you need to keep really close and then really good partnership, the innovation and the compliance, as one can't go without another one. And I had a great pleasure to work with Mihkel during my previous journey for the big bank. And I learned a lot how important are the good operational guys. And that's why I invited Mihkel, COO, to Estonian well-growing FinTech startup, Estate Guru, to share his stories about licensing. Is it good? Is it bad? Mihkel, take it over.
Hello from my side as well. So thank you, Agur, for the introduction. So yeah, today's topic about should they then regulate yourself or license yourself or not. So I don't know who exactly worded it, but the idea was that as you start as a startup, your main goal of day-to-day activities to avoid regulation as long as possible and then stay ahead of regulation curve, so that you could move freely and without any restrictions. And this is actually logical because as it might happen actually when you innovate, then there isn't any regulation in place at all first place. So this happened, for example, with cars in a way back that once they came, so there wasn't any vehicle like car, and people didn't need any rules for that. But soon it started to change. Or if maybe cars is a little like too long from history, then we have seen similar things from the recent history as well. Even this all this cryptocurrencies and all things related to that, this is something where we now see that it has grown into billions of money moving business, and a lot of investors are using it, and there's no regulation still in like overall in place. Or if we have a similar example connected to the cars, then even we could say even the electric scooters today are kind of new innovation that seems harmless things, but still running around in the cities. People now ask that should there be anything with these things as well. But yeah, one thing is like being ahead of regulation and doing something which doesn't exist, but innovation comes also from different aspects. So it could be that that there is still some kind of regulation in place, but you are actually, as a startup, exploiting the gaps of that, doing a little bit differently things, or and exploiting like kind of even loopholes or inefficiency in the market. So these examples what I brought here, yeah, Bolt, yes, innovating the way of all this ride sharing is happening. So they are competing with the taxi industry, Airbnb, at the same time competing with hotels and all that industry. And again, telling that, hey, I'm a platform, I am not falling under direct supervision of these local regulations. Or even Facebook could be made as example that who is kind of a media company, or even all the other issues today are emerging. So they are also like not controlled. So anyhow, so but this is good for the business because being unregulated allows you to move fast and far and scale quickly. So you don't have any obstacles or compliance things that you need to follow. So the big question when you start a company, and based on what I told, is that no, you shouldn't. And we could end here that this is the case, that if you want the startup to move as quickly as possible, then try to avoid it as long as possible. So why do some companies still want to actually fall under a license and then follow the regulation path? So I think even with the same examples what I made, even though that all flexibility you're getting, you at one point actually start influencing lives of our people, and actually at one point there's a call from the market or humans itself that, hey, this needs to be taken care of. So with cars it was the safety and all related that we want to be sure that some rules are followed in order not to make accidents and etc. With cryptocurrencies, the same things applies what with auto banking. So we want to make sure that AML, KYC protocols are followed. At the same time, we are protecting the investors' money. With Airbnb was a little bit different, and with also with the Bolt was a little bit different conflict, which is about traditional versus this new industry, and then there's a fighting together with the kind of hotels or taxi industry, like and this is a conflict what they have and then need to solve. And with Facebook, we also know a lot of ethical issues are now emerging, that how much they should kind of control and kind of move this to the right direction or not. So it's not that black and white, and I think there's a more kind of alternative way of looking at it when considering of being regulated or not. So what I like to think is what could be even the best way of doing it is actually evolving together with the market and actually being part of this regulation building. So we could say that this has been a kind of case for us as well at the State Guru. So what we do is actually, you might maybe know, but what we do is basically we are connecting small and medium-sized companies who want to lend money with the investors into one single platform. So one part there's companies, and another part there's investors, private individuals, or also companies, institutions, and the platform is a technological tool for connecting them and bringing them together. So as we didn't lend to private individuals, we didn't kind of directly fall under the credit institution or like banking rules, as we didn't hold the money as or facilitate it. Again, we weren't directly falling under now. And like in real estate, there's always been this alternative market that actually some rich private individual is lending money to some company or person, and they go to notary and set up the mortgage and loan agreements, and this is happening without any regulatory need. But doing it in scale, involving already hundreds or even thousands or 100,000s of people in the same environment, then actually this is something where the market again starts to kick in, and then same happened with the same new innovation or business model, and it was called the crowdfunding eventually. And from the 2013, actually, first regulations in Europe, in UK also came in place and started to regulate it. So we as well then took actually the path of being regulated as soon as possible, and as we started our operations in 2013, then already we have grown now one of the largest short-term property lenders in Europe, and we today have more than 73,000 investors from 99 different countries. We are like operational in 5 countries, having employees in these countries, and overall over 50 employees. And yes, we are already today regulated. And how we followed this path was actually that when we started, there wasn't actually any local regulations in the countries where we operated, so we were able to still move quite easily and grow our investor base. So, but soon we also saw that local regulations are put in place, and at the same time we also decided that it's logical for us to also start regulating ourselves as well. So we applied for the license in the UK. When we moved to the Lithuania, we applied there as well, and the same applied to the Finland. But the problem with our case study is still that currently what there is there are local regulations, but not yet kind of pan-European, something which you can use easily scale up throughout Europe. But this is going to be changed. So already last year it was decided that there will be implemented a pan-European crowdfunding regulation as well. And as soon as we can start actually acquiring it in the end of this year, we're going to do it. And get ourselves also some as portable license for ourselves. And why we do this for our case, it's actually logical. As we are actually working in this investment segment, we are facilitating investors' money, then we as a responsible company saw that we need to add some extra layer of protection. And to one part is just to add this protection so that investors and our users are trusting our platform more. But it was also, as I mentioned earlier, it was actually needed already in some of the markets that the local regulation was put in. So if we wanted to do business, for example, in Lithuania or in Finland, we had to have and comply with these local regulations. And through these activities, as we don't have like as a company hundreds years of history, so this actually we saw an opportunity for us to really add extra layer of this trust. If you voluntarily go and license yourself, this means that somebody else has actually looked at you and evaluated you and given kind of approval that yes, you are doing things properly. So, and maybe the fourth big point for us to go to the licensing way was actually, as we knew already at one point, that the pan-European regulation is in progress. So we saw that anyway, these things will come and we anyway need to do it. So why to wait and actually already set our processes and everything in line with the future changes. So once it comes, we are already ready and we can then go much faster and quicker without needing to start things from the beginning. So coming back to the question, to be licensed or not, I would say that it's not that black and white, because you need to actually look your own business case and see if it is necessary for you or not. So to give you some of maybe questions to ask yourself, if you are a startup who wants to and starts a business and thinks of if you need to regulate or not, or so first question, of course, is to ask yourself, am I in a business where it's actually already some regulations in place? So if you are in the business, then the answer is yes, you need to also regulate, otherwise you are not compliant and soon you will be maybe closed down because of that. But the alternative way is also maybe if you still want to test out your business idea, then actually what more and more regulators are doing is setting up some kind of sandboxes for new innovative products and ideas. And this kind of allows you to test out your business idea more clearly. So question to ask yourself, is there anything in any countries this kind of sandbox available? And then maybe this is a hint for you to go there. Also followed by that is that is there any obligatory regulation being prepared and could affect me later? So similarly, like if you already know that something is going to happen, then maybe it's parallel wise to work on this. And even if there are maybe any like direct rules available, then again, maybe it's wise for you for your business model to actually obtain some kind of new license. So it could be that you can do something extra or get new market share, or for example, in our case, actually sell our product better because and improve our offering, because with the same reasons what I mentioned before. So, and maybe the final point, even if you still see that all these last points are not for you, then again, I think more and more what becomes important looking ahead. So being actually a responsible company and socially and environmentally responsible. So maybe even maybe this is the thing what actually drives you to become licensed, so that you can take some kind of responsibility as a company whole. So yeah, these are maybe questions to ask for yourself, and maybe what we have learned through the process is that this when you are innovating, and this is something really new business model that haven't been done before, what you could expect that this regulation is taking time. So as I said, first European licenses or regulations came in place in 2013, but now last year was when the final pan-European regulation was put in place. You as a company, when you go and start licensing process, it might take time, even if you have all the papers ready. So it might take time. In our case, to get the UK license, it took us almost 4 years to be compliant. And as a previous speaker was also saying, for them it was also almost half a year, but it could have maybe taken longer. So, and doing that, it could be also costly for you if you are starting from the beginning. So you need to think when is the right time, actually, because you need to pay to the correct partners, or if you are in-house trying to do it, then you need to have some experienced people who are helping you through the process. So if you want to do it much quicker and efficiently, then doing the homework is necessary. So you actually have all the papers, all the process, right people in place, so you can move much faster. I think, I don't know if it's helping you further, but as early as need, but as late as possible. So it's not always. If you are still, you haven't had a proof of concept that your business model works, and no point of rushing straight away to try to obtaining all the license what is possible, but you still need to make business as well. So you need to balance of being working only towards the being compliant versus building the business itself. So, but what you can be sure about that when going through the process, you are evolving as a company as well, because the idea of usually the licensee is that you need to be trustworthy company, something which continues to exist long time. So you need to update all your process and etc. And this is helping you to mature yourself as well as a company. So yes, these are my little thoughts about pains and opportunities of being regulated.
Thank you, Mihkel, for that. I would like to share 2 of my own experiences also from the past. One is coming from the same direction as Mihkel told, that if possible, be part of creating legislation. And that's what I've experienced with my own startup in Latin countries. There are different large countries. They have different level of regulations in place. They're pretty different markets compared to what we used here. And the one thing we learned is that when we joined the local authorities or the local working groups who were thinking about launching the regulations locally, then we got into the super secret network. Well, it's not actually secret. You can Google for those networks. But what we discovered is that working together with those networks, opened actually an enormous amount of market data for us, which were being quite complicated for us to discover by ourselves without really physically being there and then physically meeting the people. So like starting to address the regulative tasks and questions as early as possible can help you not just with being licensed, but earning also some market presentation and then market respect. And another side, which is really a beautiful story, that if you're going to be a super fast growing and your company is going to dominate a market, is it in your own country or is it globally, whatever dream case you manage to achieve, then you need to know that if you are really dominating the market, then governments tend to start regulating you because you have a potentially too big power on what's happening in your market area. And that's for sure the place where you really need to be prepared early in advance. Like we can see from Google, from Facebook cases, they have endless amount of disputes happening at the same time in very many markets, debating that they are which institutions they actually are. They try to be platforms, so to say that we shouldn't be regulated, but more and more the governments are looking them as true service providers. So, but if you are successful, if you are growing fast, if you are really dominating your marketplace, then celebrate your success, but be ready for the regulations also at that time. But with that, I'm really happy to congratulate my Lithuanian friends for having so incredibly innovative central bank. Here in Estonia, we used to think that Estonia is the oasis of the digitalization and in the global scale, but at least in FinTech areas, we really need to look up to Lithuania. So guys, keep up the good pace and keep innovating. Thank you. And now perhaps back to the Mindaugas and to the questions.
Thank you, Agor, Michael. I don't see any questions coming from the participants, so I'll just ask a couple on my side. Michael, looking at your successful story, and I do think it was very interesting and a successful one. If you could go back in time and just change one thing, what would it be? What would you do differently? What's your lesson learned?
I think actually there's too much what we could have differently. Maybe some timing, but again, through the license process, we're thinking that we do everything correctly, and then you send out your forms and everything. You have done it already, maybe in some other country, and then something new emerges, and you start over again. So yeah, be ready to adopt and be flexible and ready to react. So yeah, and what I also really believe and think is what Agor was also saying, that if possible, then really be part of this regulation creation process well, and then have a really good relationship with the local regulators. So this we have done in all our operation countries where we are. We really like to have the open communication with the regulators, and in Estonia and actually in Lithuania, we have been also participating in these workshops to actually give our inputs through the local organizations to the pan-European regulation, for example, itself as well. So our voice is actually heard when the new business year is being regulated. So, and this is actually, I think, a really good example of this regulator versus market player cooperation, that we create actually together something which benefits all. So it benefits the end users, but it benefits the companies as well. So it's not something that's just restrict everything and but doing like this is the easiest way of doing it. So avoid any risk with our credit decisions. We could also tell no to all the loans, but then it's no business. So to have this innovation, you need to still take some risk. But this is this discussion.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks to you. So at this stage, let me conclude our conference. I want to thank, really give a big thank to our speakers. I think all of the presentations were really interesting, at least to me, and I hope that they were also interesting to the participants. As a side comment, we will share the presentations of each and every speaker, as well as when the YouTube link will be ready, we will share that link as well. So you will have the contacts of our team as well as of the speakers. If you have any questions, you want to reach out to us to discuss anything, just feel free to do that. Alternatively, you can reach to our colleague Jurgita Verikaitė, who was very helpful in organizing all this event. So you also have her contacts. So that can also be a channel for your questions or inquiries. And whichever path you choose, either you will develop your FinTech outside Lithuania, or you will decide to come to Lithuania, which we welcome very much. I wish you success. I hope some of key takeaways were really valuable, useful to you. And I shall conclude on all the best to you in developing your businesses. Stay healthy and build FinTech. Till next time. Goodbye.